The year, 1907. Our job, keep these Indians from smuggling liquor. The first general prohibition against liquor in Indian country was passed by Congress in 1832. For the most part, the Indian police were no match for bootleggers. Most bootleggers were non-Indians. Neither their Indian customers nor their white neighbors willingly gave testimony against them. Deputy U.S. Marshals were assigned to enforce the liquor laws, but Indian agents complained that they concentrated on arresting the Indian customers rather than the bootleggers themselves. Many deputies were paid on a fee basis determined on the number of arrests. It was much easier to arrest the customers. Convicting bootleggers was as hard as arresting them. The Justice Department occasionally assigned a special agent to Indian country to stop the more flagrant violations, but the law continued to be generally ignored. Even the special agents asked that some Indian detectives be hired. Commissioner William A. Jones first began to ask Congress for funds to gather evidence for prosecuting bootleggers in 1901. His initial request for $10,000 was refused. The request was renewed each year thereafter until Congress relented and appropriated $25,000 for liquor suppression in fiscal year 1907. Of that amount, $15,000 was for the Indian Territory. Shortly after the funds were appropriated, Commissioner Francis Leop reported that he had appointed 2 special officers and would appoint others later. They were called special officers because they were specialized in enforcement of the liquor laws. "It is hoped by this means," he wrote, "to diminish greatly the sale of intoxicating liquors to Indians." The task would be a formidable one, trying to enforce a very unpopular law in a part of the country not then noted for great respect for laws in general. The commissioner assigned William Eugene Johnson to Oklahoma and the Indian Territory. Johnson was a 44-year-old newspaperman. He had gone to college in Nebraska and began his journalism career there. Later he became a freelance writer and then associate director first for the New York Voice and then the New Voice in Chicago. He was also a strong advocate for prohibition. Commissioner Leop wrote, "He was selected for appointment because he had already proved not only his capacity for the sort of work to be demanded of him, but his absolute contempt for danger in the performance of a difficult task." The commissioner's evaluation was apparently based on Johnson's reputation for plain speaking among people who tended to become violent when they read uncomplimentary stories about themselves. Johnson spent most of his journalism career in courtrooms defending himself against libel suits. This is William E. Johnson, later nicknamed Pussyfoot. This was his first assignment as special officer for the Bureau of Indian Affairs and was to keep intoxicating beverages out of the Indian territories. During the months of August, September, and October of 1907, the brewers made a concerted effort to overwhelm Pussyfoot with litigation by shipping liquor in from every direction at once, openly operating bars. They had retained more than 20 of the best lawyers in the territory to conduct the campaign for them. Frequently, when Pussyfoot or his deputies seized and destroyed malt and fermented beverages, the lawyers for the breweries sued for damages and injunctions. Pussyfoot was arrested 4 times for malicious destruction of personal property, to wit low-grade beer. He was once arrested for larceny and seizing and destroying a large amount of whiskey and bar paraphernalia. The malicious destruction cases were dismissed on preliminary examination. In the larceny case, not only was Pussyfoot discharged, but the complainants were bound over to the grand jury. One was later killed in a fight with a deputy. Another was sentenced to penitentiary for life for killing a man who gave information against him. The commissioner ended up asking for more money, and the appropriation was increased to $40,000, and the Liquor Suppression Office was reorganized July 1st of 1908. Pussyfoot Johnson was named Chief Special Officer with his office in Salt Lake City, Utah, from which he supervised the work of the special officers in the field. His capacity for such an undertaking long ago passed the experimental stage, the commissioner wrote. Pussyfoot did not stay behind his desk. In 1909, the commissioner's report stated, in May, Chief Special Officer Johnson visited Laredo, Texas, the source of peyote, bought up the entire supply in the market, destroyed it, and obtained from the wholesale dealers agreements that they would no longer continue in the traffic. In 1910, the superintendent of the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota served formal notice on all saloon keepers in the villages of the reservations to close their places within 30 days. After the expiration of 30 days, Pussyfoot and his deputies, including son Clarence, closed the saloons and destroyed some 1,300 gallons of whiskey. At one saloon, a village marshal appeared as his deputies were just getting started. Harper's Weekly quoted the following account from the Minneapolis Sunday Tribune. Before the village marshal knew what was happening, he was looking into the muzzle of a long, wicked-looking revolver, which Johnson had suddenly drawn on him. "I represent the Department of Indian Affairs," he said quietly. "I represent the United States government, and you men had better get out of here until we finish our work." The men demurred, and the village marshal became insistent. Suddenly smiling, Johnson became transformed. "Get out of here," he thundered, advancing a step in the direction of the frightened marshal and his posse, and they accepted the spirit of the invitation. After he completed his work, Johnson, with his gun holstered, now went up to the marshal and asked him if he wanted to arrest them. The marshal said he did, and Johnson and his deputies went off quietly to jail. Well, Pussyfoot resigned in 1911 after securing more than 4,000 liquor law convictions. He quickly became a leader in the worldwide prohibition movement. He circled the globe 3 times and made over 4,000 speeches supporting prohibition. Although he came through his battles as special officer unscathed, he was not so fortunate when he took to his campaign to London. A group of medical students mobbed him during an anti-alcohol speech in Essex Hall in 1919, and stones were thrown at him. One stone struck him in the eye and ultimately blinded him in that eye. The students carried him through the streets of London on a stretcher, chanting, "We've got Pussyfoot now, send him back to America." Interviewed later in his hospital bed, Pussyfoot said that aside from the injury to his eye, he thoroughly enjoyed the experience. Pussyfoot was succeeded by Harold Coggeshall, who stayed only for a few months before being named superintendent of the Santa Fe Indian School. Reverend C.C. Brandon was active chief special officer for a few months before Henry A. Larson was appointed. In 1910, the headquarters had been moved to Denver. Some favorable court decisions enabled special officers to step up their activities in Oklahoma in 1913. The work was still very dangerous. Officer P.L. Bowman was killed by a shotgun blast from a speeding car at the Kansas border while he was destroying a wagon load of liquor. When the Special Officer Force was created in fiscal year 1906, the officers had been given the powers of Indian agents, including the authority to seize and destroy contraband. The 1913 Appropriations Act conferred upon special officers the power of U.S. Marshals. The marshals had the same power as the sheriff of the jurisdiction in which they were working. This here is a photo of the special officers for the suppression of liquor traffic among the Indians at their annual conference in Denver, Colorado, January 1st, 1914. Pictured furthest to the right at the top row is Clarence Johnson, son of Pussyfoot. Seated fourth from the right in the bottom row is Commissioner Caddo Shells. To his right is the Chief Special Officer Henry A. Larson, and to his left is Fred A. Diker, who handled matters related to Indian police and courts for several commissions among the early 1950s. Because of national prohibition, the Liquor Suppression Office suffered more drastic cuts. In 1918, there had been, in addition to the Chief Special Officer, 1 Assistant Chief Special Officer, 17 Special Officers, and 95 deputies. By 1921, there remained only the Chief Special Officer, 4 regular Special Officers, and an unspecified number of deputies paid at the rate of $4 a day. Department of the Interior, Indian Services. Whereas, reposing special confidence in the integrity and ability of J.E. Hinichee, I hereby commission him a Deputy Special Officer to assist in suppressing the liquor traffic among the Indians and authorize him to fulfill the duties of that office under authorization of law. And as authorized by the Department of Interior, Henry A. Larson, Chief Special Officer. J.E. Hinichee is the officer who was issued this. I know you can not see the date, but it says January 20, 1913 until June 30 of 1913. How beautiful is that?